Hi Year 4 and welcome to your Tuesday afternoon lesson. It's another history lesson and we're continuing our theme of exploring some of the Greek myths and stories that the Greeks would have told each other during the time of the ancient Greeks. Today's story is about Odysseus and an adventure he had when he landed on an island. So let me just share my screen with you. Okay, have you ever heard of a Cyclops? A Cyclops is a horrifying monster. It's a giant and it only has one eye in the middle of its forehead. This is the story of when Odysseus, who's a man, met the Cyclops. A long time ago, there was an island in the Mediterranean called Sicily. And you may remember from when we were learning about volcanoes in our volcanoes topic, that this sort of boot-shaped country is actually Italy, and Sicily is an island at the foot of Italy. On the island, there lived a Cyclops, a giant who was as big as a house with a horn on his head, long pointy ears, and only one great black winking eye in the middle of his forehead. One day, a man called Odysseus and his 12 men came to the island. They were on their way back from the battlefields when a storm had blown them off course and they ended up landing on an unknown island. They looked for a place to shelter, to rest and to find food. Nestled up in the hillside, they found a dark and gloomy cave. Inside the cave, they were surprised to find milk and cheese and a fire burning in one corner. So they sat down in the cave and waited, hoping that the owner of the cave would come back and would help them. Soon they heard a clatter of hooves and a herd of giant sheep came into the cave, driven by a giant man. When Cyclops came into the cave, he was surprised to see the men inside, sitting round his fire and eating his milk and cheese. In the blink of an eye, he pushed a huge boulder across the entrance and trapped the men. "Supper!" he roared, and picking up a man in each giant hand, he gobbled them up and spat out their belts and sandals. The men were terrified, but clever Odysseus had a plan. He told the Cyclops he had a present for him and gave him some wine to drink. Almost instantly, the Cyclops fell fast asleep. The men tried to push the boulder away from the entrance of the cave, but even though there were 10 of them, they were not strong enough. They were trapped. But Odysseus was busy sharpening a long pole in the corner of the cave. When it was done, the men heated the point until it was red hot in the fire. Then, lifting the log all together, they stabbed the Cyclops in his eye, and he was blinded. When Cyclops opened the cave and pulled back the boulder to let the sheep out to graze in the morning, he felt each of the sheep in turn so that no men could escape. But Odysseus and his men had tied themselves to the bottom of the sheep, and they escaped from the cave without the Cyclops seeing or feeling them. The men escaped from the island and sailed away safely. They did not know that the Cyclops was the son of the sea god Poseidon, and that he would take his revenge on them. But that's another story. So that's the end of the story about Odysseus and the Cyclops. And I thought we would have a little think today about the different perspectives of the characters in the story. So if you remember from our literacy last week, having a different perspective means that people can see the same thing in different ways. And we looked at this picture of a letter on the ground, and the man in black can see it and he says it's a W, and the man in red who's seeing it from a different perspective, from a different place, says no, it's an M. So we're going to think about how the story that happened to both Odysseus and the Cyclops might have felt different to different characters, and what those characters might have felt and how they might have thought. So you might just want to stop the video now and maybe rewind it and just check this part of the story. So this is the part of the story when the Cyclops comes back to his cave and finds Odysseus and his men there. What do you think the Cyclops might have been thinking. So I've added in a little thought bubble. So perhaps you want to pause the video and have a think about what you think Cyclops' perspective of this part of the story might be. Okay, so I had a think, and I thought the Cyclops might have been thinking, who are these people making themselves at home in my cave and eating my food? I think he would have been a little bit indignant, maybe. I mean, if somebody turned up in my house when I wasn't there and just sat themselves down in my living room and started eating my food, I think I would feel a bit upset when I came back. Might not have quite reacted like the Cyclops, though. Okay, so let's have a little think about maybe Odysseus's perspective here. So again, this is the part of the story where the Cyclops traps the men in the cave. What do you think Odysseus was thinking here? So put Odysseus down here. Again, you might want to pause the video, go back and look at the story again if you want to remember what happened in this part of the story. Okay, so I thought that Odysseus might have been thinking, oh, this crazy man-eating monster has trapped us in his cave. We've got to find a way to get out of here. He might have been thinking, oh my gosh, I've lost 2 of my men to this crazy monster already. We need to get out of here. We need to do whatever it takes to get out of here. Okay, so obviously there are 2 sides to any story, and so although the Greeks thought Odysseus was a great hero because he used his brain and his strength and his courage to defeat monsters and win battles and sort of have great adventures and succeed and get home safely. Obviously the Cyclops wasn't doing anything, he was just minding his own business, and those men just turned up in his house and started eating his food and things. So I think there's 2 sides to every story. So I'm going to give you 2 options of activities for this afternoon. And let me just show you what those are. So the first option is to have a go at retelling the story of Odysseus and the Cyclops. So I have got a picture version of the story with some of the pictures from the story that we had looked at, and you can see those things. And underneath each picture, there is a space for you to type what happened in that part of the story. So try to include in your story how some of the characters might have thought and might have felt. So try and give that information to your reader as part of the story. So we might say, after a ferocious storm, Odysseus and his men were relieved to land on an island. They looked around for somewhere to rest and shelter. Okay, so you might sort of start describing how they came to be here and what happened. You don't have to tell the full detail of the story. I don't mind if you wanted to give more detail. So sometimes the Greeks, when they would have been retelling these stories, and they wouldn't have had books, they would have been telling them as a verbal story in words. They would have added in bits and pieces. So if you want to add in bits and pieces to your story, that's okay too. Okay, so think about trying to add in how the characters were feeling. So I've said they were relieved, they were pleased, they were glad to be on dry land again after the ferocious storm. Okay, and they looked around for somewhere to rest and shelter. And then you can go on to the next picture and describe what's happening in that one. So that's one task that you could do. I'll just show you the other task that I have got for you if you prefer to do something a bit more drawing based. So in this second option of a task, I have broken down the story into little sentences, and I would like you to choose one of these parts of the story. So you might choose this one here. This is quite an exciting one. So the Cyclops trapped the men inside the cave with a boulder. and for that one you're going to draw a picture of what was going on in that story. What I'd like you to do if you're going to do this task is to draw into your picture some kind of thought bubble showing how one of the characters, at least in that picture, is feeling. So try and imagine how that character is feeling or what they're thinking. So you're trying to describe and explain what's going on in the story at that point. So for this task, you don't need to draw all of the pictures. I mean, you can if you want to, but your main task is to choose one of the parts of the story. And again, there are six parts to the story. I've summarized it into 6 parts. So choose one of those parts of the story, draw, so just with a pen and paper, or if you want to draw it on like paint on the computer, that's fine too, but I find that a bit tricky. I think it's sometimes easier to have just a pen and paper and just do some nice colours on it and try and draw in those thought bubbles as well. Okay, so I hope you have lots of fun. We're really looking forward to seeing your retellings of the story of Odysseus and the Cyclops. And once you have done your work, if you have drawn your work and done it with pen and paper, please can you take a photo and send it to either Year 4 Chestnuts at australiabyronwood.org or y4maple@australiabyronwood.org. Okay, me and Miss Whitehouse will look forward to seeing all of your work, and I hope you have a nice afternoon. Bye.